everybody, and welcome back to the Soulful Journey. I am so happy to have you guys with me joining for episode 4 today. So this is something that I've been wanting to have an episode on. I've kind of been talking about it to friends and people that I have interacted with, over the last couple months, I would say. And the topic that I really wanted to kind of dive into is this whole idea of me learning to date myself for the first time. And I know this might sound a little bit weird, so let me explain, kind of where I'm coming from. So as I've kind of discussed in the previous episodes where, I was going through some of my dark night of the soul, really letting go of things that no longer serve me, whether it be relationships or, things that no longer serve me, such as, old ways of being. Drinking was one of those for me. And so I'm unlearning all these things. And, I got to a point where I was like, okay, I am doing all this work. I'm letting go. I'm, getting to a place where I'm like, okay, like I see this better version of myself, but now what? And, it took me a couple months, but I kind of was in this weird limbo where I felt as if I was kind of stuck in a way, because I felt like, okay, well, I just took all these things out of my cup, which is great, but now what do I do? What do I fill my cup with? And so it came to this whole idea, or this whole notion of learning to date myself for the first time. And I also started to realize in this, because as some of you guys may know, I think I've mentioned it a couple of times now in previous episodes, that, I am with my partner, my husband, and we've been together for 17 and a half years. And we've always kind of just been there with each other through this whole journey. And when I started going through kind of my spiritual work, I felt like a lot of things that I had to do on my own. It wasn't a joint venture. Although we're still sharing life together, we're still doing things together and all that, it just wasn't, this piece of my life wasn't something that I was doing with him. I was doing it more on my own. And so things that, maybe I previously used to find, enjoyable, I wasn't doing that anymore. And I realized, oh my gosh, like, what am I into? What do I like to do? And it seemed kind of foreign and weird to me to be having these kind of conversations with myself when it was first happening, because I'm 36 years old, but at the time when this was kind of happening was over the summer. So I was 35, and I'm like, I'm 35 years old and I'm learning about myself for the first time. Like, okay. But I'm realizing the more that I hear other people's stories is age does not matter, time frame does not matter, and there's better now than ever, And so just because I'm learning what my new interests are and what my new version of self entails does not mean that I'm behind that I'm behind or something. I had this notion in my head that I was behind the game with where everyone else is getting it, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm this age and I'm not getting it yet. I'm now just starting to get to learn about myself. And so the reason why I bring up my husband is because there's a lot of things that we do together, and that's, things that we enjoy, but there's never been things that I've really done on my own. I've always either done it with him or do it with friends. Like I said, I think before, I was a very go with the flow. I still am a very go with the flow person, which I did learn about that about myself as well, the going with the flow piece. But I didn't really have hobbies. I didn't really have things that served me for my greater good. My hobbies included social drinking, and not that that's bad. It served its purpose, but I got to a point where I was like, okay, my body is literally not able to handle this anymore, and I want to do things that Leeann specifically is into. And I actually had this conversation with my dad at one point where, we were talking and I was like, yeah, I'm just trying to figure out like, what are my interests? What are my things? And, he had even said, he's like, yeah, I mean, I've always had hobbies. I've always, done this or done that. And I, really reflected on that where I'm like, yeah, I mean, maybe it's just because of my generation where, technology and I don't know. I don't know where I fell short on learning my hobbies. My hobby was either going to school, which I felt like I was in school forever, or socially drinking, and that was an escape behavior. It wasn't me being present. So I was faced with this question and this concept or idea of dating myself for the first time. And I got to a point where I was asking those questions, what is Leeann like? But I didn't get to that point right away. Like I said, I had unlearned all these things, but I was stuck for a little while. And I kept, thinking like someone was going to save me, or things would just start, flowing for me, and I didn't have to put much effort into it. And so I, weeks on end, months on end, just felt like I was almost stuck. I didn't have, work to rely on because work had really slowed down for me. And this is in my new work with QHHT and, even this podcast, like all of this was on a standstill. And I now realize looking back, I'm like, oh, it was on a standstill because I was being forced out of my comfort zone to be like, you need to figure out what also brings you joy and happiness beyond just working and beyond just, get into business, because that's the Virgo in me. I'm kind of like, I just got to get it all figured out and get it all done. And it almost was so debilitating because I felt like, oh, if I'm not productive, then I'm not amounting to anything. And sometimes you don't have to be productive in order to have that full life. And I had to unlearn that concept of like thinking, oh, I get to have enjoyment after I'm productive. Because then your whole life, you're just on that hamster wheel, which is what I was, where it's like all work, all work, all work. And then when it came to enjoyment, I was like, oh, I'm not going to enjoy myself unless I put in the hard work first. And I feel like there's a balance. That's what I'm really recognizing, is going within, feeling what feels good at that moment and go with that. And also, when you have play incorporated in your life, your hobbies, whatever your interests are, you're 10 times more productive. And that's what I'm realizing, is that I was almost counterproductive doing it the other way. But again, I had to figure this out, trial and error. And so here I am, still figuring it out, because it's a journey. It's not like, oh, I figured it all out and I got it, and here we are. It's really just getting the little puzzle pieces along the way, and then figuring, okay, there is an easier way of going about this, and they're all just lessons anyways. And so for me, in this process of when I finally kind of came to the realization that I have to put energy into it in order for me to start seeing, what my hobbies are and what I'm interested in, is, just branching out of my comfort zone and not limiting myself to thinking I had to do things a certain way. Because that was the other part with my spiritual journey, is that I, was doing all this self-work, and then I realized, oh, something that I feel really called to and always have is helping people. And so in order for me to help people, I have to have people take me serious. But really it was like I was looking at myself like I have to take myself serious. And I'm realizing that it's like people are going to relate to you when you're authentically yourself, not when, you're this, all put together person. And then it's like, okay, now I can help you because I got it all figured out. And it's like, none of us have it figured out. I think there's beauty in being able to just be vulnerable and be who you are in the moment. And that's going to resonate with some people. And then with other people, it's not, and it's all good. Either way, it's just really being authentically yourself, no matter what, but also sharing your story along the way and not waiting, which I thought in my mind I had to wait until I had it figured out, because I'm like, how am I supposed to help people if I don't even have it figured out? And I don't think any of us ever do, because as I'm recognizing, the more that I figure out, the more I realize I don't know. And because it's forever evolving, forever changing, and there's infinite amount of knowledge and wisdom and lessons and things that we can get to learn or know or grow into. So it's kind of just really accepting that piece of it. And so within this, I was able to kind of start getting out of my comfort zone, start looking at, okay, what is it that Leeann's interested in and trying new things. And so for me, one thing that I did that was completely out of the norm for me is I had one of my friends who I actually met through my QHHT stuff. And she, would go to these spiritual events. And I was like, I think I want to go to one, why not? It's something completely different. And so I went to one back in September, and it was all these different workshops and people from, all different walks of life. And it was so cool to be able to go out into that experience. And I'll be honest, at first I was super intimidated because I'm like, okay, number one, I don't have the crutch of, drinking, which I feel like was a crutch for me for a while, because I was like, oh, it lessens my nerves or my anxiety. And so I didn't have that. And also it's all brand new people. So it's getting out of my comfort zone and meeting new people that I, don't know. And it's a full room of them. And it's doing these workshops that I've never done before, but let's do it anyways. And it was so beautiful going through that, because it's all of these folks that are just willing to show up as they are, and coming in, you feel the warmth of the environment. And something that I grabbed from that specific, event was there was like these breathing exercises. And so it's funny because this is something that I started to learn about myself, is how much, I would identify with, fear of trying new things, and then I would be like, oh, I have anxiety because of it. You actually are just experiencing anxious like feelings or symptoms, because I noticed how much I would be like holding my breath. And so it was like going into this completely new environment. They did some breath work, and I'm like, oh, like I've heard about breath work, and now I'm realizing something more about myself, is that, oh, it's because I've been holding my breath, which I kind of knew and had little breadcrumbs kind of presented to me before, but it wasn't until I kind of had this workshop where I was like, I realized I was able to put two and two together. And so that was a cool piece of me stepping outside of my comfort zone, being able to, meet some new people, but then also realizing something about myself a little bit more. And so from that event, it was me just trying, other new things and learning new things that kind of came across my path. And one of the things that came across my path as well was the practices of Ayurveda. And so this was actually presented to me through Sahar Rose, which I have mentioned her before. And she has a beautiful book called Discover Your Dharma, and it's about our Ayurveda. And for those of you that don't know what Ayurveda is, it's basically what she calls the sister practice of yoga. And your Dharma, or what I kind of attributed that to, is kind of like what your soul's purpose is, but more than that, it's kind of like who you are, what you signed up for in this life. And so through learning some of her practices, or things that she was kind of talking about, it started to put more context of why I am the way that I am. And one of the things that I learned about myself as well through listening to her book was that part of my dharma, or what I attribute my soul's purpose is being a teacher. And it kind of made sense to me, because I'm like, dang, I've always wanted to be able to help people. I've always been on this quest to get knowledge, and I love sharing that knowledge as soon as I get it. And even backtracking on, my early days in college, where I thought I wanted to be a teacher. So I went through all the teaching credential classes, and then that led into school psychology. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it makes sense now. And now within my spiritual work, here I am, even on this podcast, kind of honing in on that. And so it was like, oh my gosh, like this makes so much sense of why I am the way that I am. And I feel like when you're starting this process of dating yourself, these things just naturally come across your life. And it's almost like, before, I'm not discounting that maybe I was given little signals before, but it's like I wasn't purposefully trying to seek them out. I wasn't purposely, trying to slow my roll. So in doing this and learning who I am, it's like the puzzle pieces are starting to make more sense. But when it came to really discovering, what my interests are, but also how that related to my work, I started to realize that previously, in the way that I was kind of, I guess, conditioned in a way, or programmed, that I had to get over, is I kept thinking that I had to just be and fit in one box, that I had to just be, I'm just a QHHT practitioner, or I'm, just the school psychologist. I'm just this person. And that's why I wore this shirt, because I said normal is boring. And it completely is. It's like we're not supposed to be just these cookie cutter versions of self. We're actually multifaceted, and there's so many beautiful things that we are capable of, and we're really limitless in that way. And so through this process, I started to realize that I'm like, I don't have to just be one thing. I don't have to just do one thing. I can do as many things as I want, and I can discover as much as I want about myself if it feels good. You can kind of hear my dog snoring in the background. That's Miss Motley. But another thing that kind of happened more recently is, as I've mentioned before, I love listening to the Positive Head podcast. And on the Positive Head podcast, they had mentioned that the main host and his partner, they live in what's called the Mystic Manor, and there's other folks that live there as well. And it's really cool. Like, they just put on these amazing spiritual events, and I was listening to them talking about it, and I was like, gosh, it would be so cool to be able to go sometime. So as it would be on my Instagram, I had come across my feed was the Mystic Manor, and I'm like, oh my gosh, here it is. This is something that I had wanted to go and, experience, and here it is coming across my Instagram. And I realized that it was in Venice. I had no idea that it was in California. And maybe they had mentioned it on the podcast, but it just, I don't know, it didn't resonate until I had seen that. And so I was like intimidated, because I'm like, okay, this is another event that I wouldn't know anybody, and I wonder if my friend would go. I feel like the one that had invited me to the previous event that I'd gone to, I feel like this is something that she would do. And so I ended up reaching out to her, and I asked her, hey, is this something that you would be interested in? And she's like, I already bought tickets for it. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, let's do it. And so it's so funny how I'm realizing the more I'm stepping outside of my comfort zone, is the more that the universe is just like providing, and it's providing right away. I mean, it's crazy, the time in between, I'm manifesting it way quicker. And so I was super excited to go to this event, and I actually just went to this event. So it was just a couple days ago, last week. And within this event, what's so funny is, in the back of my mind, because I traditionally, was so used to my old life and just what was comfortable, and this was something completely new and different, and I was kind of like fish out of water a little bit. And it was a dry event too, so there was no drinking. So again, it was great to be involved in a whole entire community where we're all coming together and everyone's very present. And that's also intimidating, because when you go to social events like I was used to, I was so used to going to social events and having, a drink or something that kind of allows you to like lessen the nerves a little bit, especially a whole room full of brand new people. And there was quite a bit of people here, probably at least over 100 people, I would venture to say. But going into it, I was like, okay, well, I'll probably only stay for a couple hours, and then I'll go, just to say that I did it, and we'll, see where it goes from there. And I ended up staying for the whole thing. I think I left like 20 minutes before it ended, which was like 3 in the morning. And so it's what I'm learning from this is when you're learning to date yourself, you start to do things outside of your comfort zone, and you start to learn things about yourself, and you start to realize what resonates. And it's all about a feeling. It's all about feeling things through. And there's going to be some things that you're like, okay, I'm trying these new things. I'm trying on, this for size, and it's not really fitting. But at least you're trying. And that's one thing that I'm constantly reminding myself, that it's, even if maybe not everything is coming all at once and I don't have all the answers and things are uncomfortable or new or foreign, it doesn't mean that it's bad. And at least you're trying, and at least, you're finding what works for you. And for me, I was so used to that comfort zone of, having all of my things be with people that, are still in my life. But I'm starting to do things now that are authentic to my interests and authentic to who I am, and also not limiting myself. And so another part that I wanted to kind of discuss was the fact, like I said before, is not boxing yourself in. Whereas before I thought like I am just a QHHT practitioner. I am have to be taken seriously and all this stuff. Is that I started tapping into my creative outlets as well. And so even just my past birthday, I wanted to do something different, and I love being able to decorate. I'm like, I love being able to decorate and do things like that. And I never historically had the time because I was at my, my system job as a school psychologist. And so I had no time at all. And now I am having this time to explore and to play. And I have the time to be able to, find interests that I have. And so for my birthday, I wanted to do something different. And so I decided to set up a picnic for myself. And it was so much fun. And I was able to completely tap into my creative side. And it's so funny because before I had set it up, I thought to myself, this would be kind of fun to do as a side hustle or just for fun. I thoroughly enjoy creating and decorating and doing things like that, but I also really enjoy bringing people together. My husband and I constantly, are doing things where we're bringing people to our home, or bringing people together. It's just something that I've always really enjoyed doing. I really love creating that sense of community. It's something that brings me happiness. And so it was so funny. I was thinking to myself as I was like putting stuff together before my birthday, I was like, oh, this would be kind of fun. But then that self-limiting belief comes back in again, like, no, like, why would you do this? Like, you're supposed to be, a spiritual teacher and this sort of thing. And all of that monkey mind chatter. And I ended up having my birthday, and it was such a beautiful night. And I had 3 or 4 of my guests, of my friends, that had said, you should do this for a living. Like, you should do this. And I even had people that reached out to me outside of that, that saw pictures that I posted, and they're like, oh, I had thought that you had hired someone. And I'm like, oh my gosh, okay. Like, it was just what I needed to kind of hear, to be like, why not? Like, why not explore that? Why not be able to, see where this goes? Like, you have nothing else to lose. And that's what I'm learning about this process of dating myself, is it's like, don't limit yourself to thinking that you should or could only be X, Y, and Z. I think that that's something that we're seeing more and more and more. Like Sahara Rose, I loved her example of like, how she has blossomed. Like, she is this spiritual teacher, and she's also has opened her schooling for her, called the Dharma Institute. And then she's also DJing. It's like, we have so many things that we are capable of doing, and that all comes from the power of play and the power of getting to know yourself and getting to know what your interests are and what you like or what you don't like, and the only way of doing that is by trying. And that's one thing from this whole process of learning to date myself, has really been trying and not getting stuck in my old thought patterns or my old ways of doing things. It's kind of like almost getting to a point where it's like, I tried this for so long and I'm happy and grateful for how far it got me. But now that I'm evolving and I'm coming into this new version of self, it's like, why limit yourself to just the familiar? Why not unlimit yourself by just trying new things and by getting out of your own way? And to me, although it's been scary, I'm not gonna lie, there has been times that I'm like, okay, like I don't know where this is gonna go, or this is intimidating. Like going to those events, they were super intimidating for me at first, but then once I went and I'm like meeting all these people that are just so down to earth and so humble, and they're totally geeking out on the same things that I'm interested in. I'm learning things from them. Um, just really, I mean, I'm just like in awe by how much connection and beautiful things and experiences that I'm having from meeting these new people and these new environments. And it's like, that's what it's about. That's what it's about, is not limiting yourself and seeing, what can you explore in life and where does that take you? Because you'll never know. And I think that the biggest crutch is comfort. And, our human design, the way that we are, we seek comfort and we try to avoid discomfort. But when you face those things that maybe seem a little bit uncomfortable, but it's just kind of the unknown, but you embrace it and you embrace that process, it's so beautiful to see the things that come out the other side. Whether it's like, hey, you discovered that this is not something that you're into, or you discover a whole new version of self, or people that you start to connect with and collaborate with, or whatever it is. That's, to me, what has been the most exciting about this process of just really learning about who I am. And also within the fact of learning who I am, it has been really me having acceptance of why I am the way that I am, and also not settling for saying like, that's just it. And just like when you're dating someone new, there's going to be things that you learn about them that you're like, oh, okay, like that's different, or let's explore that a little bit so that you become closer. And that's kind of what I'm learning about myself, is it's just like, oh, okay, that's like, again, my archetypes, my doshas, of just figuring out, oh, I'm this kind of energy and that kind of energy. Okay, cool, like I know that about myself now. But how can I hone in on like that understanding and explore more of who I am based on that, and kind of follow that as a guideline? So I feel like it's just this whole new world that I'm learning and exploring. And again, I'm here to do it alongside you guys. And I think that will wrap it up for today. Again, as I mentioned before, I would love to hear from you guys. I love seeing the comments and hearing your guys' feedback on experiences that you're also having yourself. So please, please, please feel free to write a review, especially on Apple Podcasts, because that's how the show is shared. When you write your reviews or you add your stars, that's how other people are going to be able to reach the show as well. So I really appreciate all the love and support and feedback that you guys have to share with me as well. And I hope everyone has a beautiful rest of your day, and we'll see you guys next time.